So I am so excited to talk to you. This is the Karen Reed case is something I've been following. And I think you did a really good job, a thorough job of, showing us behind the scenes and everything, especially with being in the war room and the access you got, which is amazing. But I read that you didn't really know much about the case before you got the project, and I wanted to hear about that. How did it come about for you?
Well, yeah, I had heard of the name Karen Reed, but and I knew that there was a case on the East Coast, but I really didn't know any of the details. So there's an attorney who was representing Karen and Alan Jackson, who knew me and had been contacted by a lot of different producers. And so I got a text from him actually. He goes, "I have a case for you. I have a story for you." And all these producers are asking me about it. And so he sent me a document about it. And then I did some research and I was like, this is an amazing case. It was, you don't say no to that kind of access and to that incredible story, the complications and the suspicions and the suspicious behavior on everybody's part. It's incredible. It's an incredible story. I was just sitting here watching the trial.
Yes, I was gonna say. So, what's it like to be, not a part of it this time around? Is it kind of like, oh, I wish I were there?
Actually, no. For about maybe 2 months ago, I was like, oh, it'd be great to go back. But, we really covered it. Karen and Alan approached us because they wanted their story told. And Karen says that in the documentary. She says, this is my testimony because she
Yeah.
knew she was probably not going to be asked to take the stand. So we told her story, and in through the first trial, and the second trial is certainly different. There's a new prosecutor, some additional defense attorneys, new evidence, new witnesses, but her story is the same. And I feel like we really did that. And it would feel repetitive, I think, to go back and do that again. But
Yeah.
not to say I'm not fascinated by the second trial, and
Right.
and it's very different so far.
And the things that have come to light, like Carrie Roberts is like kind of going back on what she said, which is so interesting. But why do you think Karen Reed case has struck such a chord? I feel like it's like the small town nature of it. That like, these are people that like went to high school together and it's just like this group. I was wondering if you had an opinion on that after spending so much time with them.
It's really divided the community there, which is sad.
Yeah.
Friendships have been destroyed and people don't talk about it. They're very careful not to talk about it because you don't know whose side someone's on.
Yeah.
The defense, it's mentioned in the documentary, the defense had a strategy to get some media attention around this case. Nothing was going
Yeah.
on. They reached out to a blogger who
Turtle
took it
boy.
on, Turtle Boy, who took it on, and it became a very, very, very big case. I think that, I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I think there's corruption everywhere, not deep seated, but there's, some bad actors, I guess, and actresses when it comes to law enforcement. And so I think people just were like, this is another case. This beautiful young woman is being framed. I think it has to do with Karen and her personality.
Yeah.
She's beautiful and she's articulate.
She's so
I think
smart.
if
Yeah.
she really is. And if the profile of the defendant was something different, maybe the case wouldn't have gotten that kind of attention. But it was part of the defense strategy to bring attention to this case and try and get people, I think, to um, accept the thought that she could have been framed and that there was corruption and cover up involved.
Which is funny because you say that she's like, she is so engaging and so like she's charismatic, but it's also like she's a very flawed defendant that, she was drunk like a lot of people would see her as, oh, she's a woman, she was cheating, which I guess half of them do. It's surprising to me how many people have kind of rallied around her. Which and it also and with such your documentary really covers this in a way that I have not seen anything else cover it, that this rabid fan base of almost like Swifties. I'm going to call them Reedies because I was kind of like, oh, cool. There are people rallying around her. And then I'm like, oh, this is kind of intense. What was it like seeing that. Because I feel like you're either team Cop or your team Reed, really.
Yeah, we were I think that I think if you're on the Free Karen Reed team, this documentary wasn't going to change anyone's mind.
Yeah.
I really don't believe we didn't approach it like, oh, we didn't approach it with one point of view or another. We tried to be as unbiased as we could because we knew that this trial was coming up. And so I don't think the documentary was going to change anyone's mind. But I've heard that people have changed their mind, and I've seen it, on X and social media. But people are very quiet about whether they've changed their mind or not. So at this point, I'm not there in Boston, so I don't know how many people are out there every day like there were when we were there.
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't seen any of the crowd shots, and they moved the buffer zone back so that it might be a bit of a deterrent to people. It's like, well, it's not as much fun to be a block and a half away from the courthouse. So I don't know how many people are actually out there right now. But while we were there for the first trial, we saw the crowd grow and grow and grow and grow. And there were people we interviewed, people who had come from England, somebody from Ireland, somebody from Australia, and they just wanted to be there for a day and
Wow.
experience it. It was crazy. It was really wild. Yeah.
That is really wild. Um, what was it like talking to John's friends who, all think she's guilty? Were they reluctant to speak for this documentary? I mean, they really give interesting points of view in it, but I was wondering if it was like something that they struggled with.
The John's family and his friends were very quiet throughout the first trial, and they talk about this in the interview we did. Not sure if that actually made it into the documentary, but in speaking to them, because they didn't want to interview. They just wanted justice to be served and to the trial to go on. But when it ended in a mistrial, they kind of looked at that, and Brendan said, we kind of realized we should have been speaking up a little bit more. So then they did start doing interviews. I've seen interviews with them, with other projects. So it was. I loved interviewing John's friends. I mean, they're crying, I'm crying. It was so emotional. They care so much about him. I'm still in touch with them, and they're just wonderful, salt of the earth. Really cared about this guy and John. That's one of the things we tried to do in the documentary. It's about the trial, and it's about the case. And it's easy for John, the victim here, to get lost in all of that. And we really
Yeah.
tried throughout each of the episodes to have a piece about John, have his friends talk about him, or their theory about what happened. So that was that was very conscious on our part. And I still feel like I wish we could have included more because their interviews were incredible, incredible. And there's so much that didn't get included in the documentary about John.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting too, thinking about how she talked about, like, some people criticized her that she didn't mourn enough. But then I love that moment you have where she talks about, like, well, I had to mourn fast because my life was on the line next. And I thought that was really interesting. Just a moment that I thought of that I really love from the doc. Um, did you like I read that this is her testimony as you've talked about with like I think you've told about like I read an interview with you in the Hollywood Reporter. Um did you want to have a degree of objectivity to the even though you're like basically on the other side or and if you did, how did you maintain it or did you kind of just go with the side of Karen Reed?
We didn't, we did a lot of research before we went, but we didn't know how the trial was going to go. I'd never covered behind the scenes of a defense team preparing and being involved in a trial. So every day they didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know. So we certainly didn't know what was going to happen. So there wasn't a lot of preparing. There was more following. So we'd be in the war room, and they would get a list of the witnesses that were coming on the stand. The prosecution would give them a list of the witnesses, and they would put it on this whiteboard. So we knew what witnesses were coming up, but they didn't know what the prosecution was exactly going to present and how they were going to present it. So there was, I think, the word that became kind of almost a just an almost an everyday word was pivot. We just it was constant pivoting. Are we going to, follow them in the car today? What's happening in the war room today? We couldn't be everywhere all the time. There's times when we would come down in the morning and they'd say, "Oh, Terry, you should have been in the war room last night at 1 o'clock. We had a breakthrough." And I was like, "Oh no, we missed it." And then there were times when they said, "You know what, we need the room here." And so we would leave,
Wow.
because so there were sidebar, well, I say sidebar as a short term, but there were off camera in conversations, many of them that didn't include the cameras. So we had incredible access, but not 110%
Wow.
access.
That's so crazy because I feel like you cover so much in that. So I'm like, curious about what they did. Not none of my business what they didn't want, but like that's really interesting. Did you form an opinion? Like, do you have an opinion on the case, or do you leave that just to like?
We really tried to be as balanced as we could, and that was our goal. And I told Karen and Alan at the top, I said, there's two sides to this case, to this story. We have to tell both sides. We no The audience isn't going to understand the defense of Karen if they don't understand the prosecution of
Yeah,
Karen. So we had to do both. If the if Karen had been acquitted, the ending would have been different, and the film would have been a little bit different. If she had been
yeah,
convicted, same thing, it would have been a
yeah,
little bit different. But we just really tried to keep an open mind, and I've decided that it's the jury. It's
yeah,
up to the jury to decide. It's not my place to decide what, if Karen is innocent or guilty. We did our job, which was to tell Karen's story, and then she did. I think she did. Of course, there's plenty of footage that we weren't able to use, but I think that the heart of her story is there.
do you know if she's like happy with how it turned out?
I've heard she hasn't watched it. I
Okay.
was told she didn't want to watch it because she didn't want to get distracted by it. I don't know. That was a while ago. I don't know if she's watched it since. So no, I don't know, and I haven't gotten an opinion about that.
She probably has a lot going on. So
She has a
yeah,
lot. She has a
yeah,
lot going on. This is
yeah,
something that, in her mind, I'm sure I did this a year ago. I told my
right.
story. I can't think about this right now, but I don't think she would be. I like to think that she would feel like it was a balanced portrayal
Yeah,
of
I
the
I
case
think
and
it
the
is.
story.
Yeah.
I've talked
Um,
to one of the attorneys who called me actually after and said that he felt like it was really, it was well done and well balanced, and so that made me feel.
yeah, and it just goes to show how many different, there's so many different stories in it, and I know you have a background in unsolved mysteries, and I was wondering, would you consider this case an unsolved mystery kind of thing, like that we have so many, or do you think it's pretty solvable?
I don't, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to really know what happened
Yeah,
at 34 Fairview that night. In fact, one of our reporters says exactly that,
yeah,
Sue O'Connell. I don't know if Karen exactly remembers. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think this is, there isn't an investigation happening right now. So when you say solvable,
yeah,
there isn't an unsolved element to it. I mean, other than the big question of what actually happened.
yeah.
But I don't know that there's any more evidence to find or to dig up or suspects, anything like that. So yeah, I think that both sides that argue this case are always going to, maintain their position, whether she's acquitted God forbid it's another mistrial. I don't
Yeah,
think anyone wants that,
right.
or she's convicted. I don't know. There's three charges, and then there's lesser charges under those three charges. So there's lots of ways this could go at
Yeah,
the final verdict of the second trial.
yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for your documentary. It was really thorough and really gave me a sense of, things that I didn't know about the case. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Are you watching the second trial? Are you taking peeks in? I know you can't watch it cover to cover, but
Yeah, I've been listening to like recaps about it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that's how I knew about like Carrie Roberts's like big reveal and everything. But yeah, I've been trying to keep up with it. It's a fascinating story. And because I think, thinking about unsolved mysteries, that's usually like a supernatural, like what happened. This is like the supernatural element of it is that people are all telling, they have different memories of that night, which I think is also another thing that's very interesting about this story is like this idea of memory, or are people lying. um
And there's memory, and then there's alcohol affecting memory too.
Alcohol, yes.
That was huge. I think the two things that my friends and people I've talked to have taken away from the case itself is don't drink and drive,
Right. Yes.
and don't text anything you don't want the world to see.
Right, that too.
Yes,
Yeah.
the texts play a big part in this case, and it's like, oh man, yeah,
Right.
nobody, you text, you don't ever think that it's going to be used in a court of law. So
Right, yeah, now
yeah,
I'm going to be rethinking everything I've ever
yeah,
said.
yeah. Well, thank you for your time. It's always great
Yeah,
to chat.
thank you so much. Yeah,
Okay,
have a
take
wonderful
care.
day.
You too.